Hello, I'm delighted to be able to speak to you on the Empower Network. Um, I have a great pleasure to take you on a journey from childhood, astride of the equator, somewhere high in the middle of Africa, and it is a very good journey I'd like you to share with me right from childhood. As you may imagine, Uganda was named the Pearl of Africa by Winston Churchill. The background to that is simply from the fact that the weather is so excellent. Next to the source of the River Nile in Uganda, by Jinja, is Kampala, only 80 kilometers away, and the weather has been extremely good, as comfortable as anyone would wish it to be. I would like to take you on a journey looking at initially childhood, where I was able to grow up in Africa and be able to share with you the experiences from childhood as we grow up. As you know, Uganda was a British colony until about 1962, when I was in my very early teens. But in the mid-50s, I recall that life was very, very interesting. You would have a child in a home and be able to compare with your colleagues in different homesteads. My aim, though, is to show that young children can enjoy the neighborhood and they're very inquisitive, but different situations avail themselves to them, depending on parenthood, the ability of the family, the standard of growth. But very briefly, I am a very good friend of the energy sector, and we have been blogging in the past about energy. I hope we'll be able to continue, but it may not be a bad idea to commence with life in childhood in Uganda. In the early 50s, our colonial masters, the United Kingdom, decided to put up a hydropower station to generate electricity for partly Uganda, but largely to export much of it to meet the demand in neighboring Kenya. Kenya, part of the East African countries, which were initially Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda, is our gateway to the east and coast on the Indian Ocean through the port of Mombasa. And much earlier on, there was a process of constructing a railway line towards Uganda Western at the foot of the Rwenzori mountain, where we have Kasese. And the purpose of this was to collect copper for export to external markets. That did go quite well. And for that purpose, initially, the British colonial masters brought in groups of Indians to come and assist with the construction of the railway. In those days, Nairobi used to be a swamp, but rising from the coast in Mombasa, through those plains and up the hill, one would have the rail reach Uganda, through Kampala, the capital, to Kasese in western Uganda, and the main purpose was to be able to export copper, which Uganda had in abundance. Now, those constitute a bit of the background. We have always enjoyed excellent weather that I'll describe a little later, but I would like to look at the context of a child growing up in a typical African country. I think that term should be restricted to our neighborhoods because even within Uganda, we had different levels of development. In aspects that excited the child, during those early days, I remember we had a radio made from the United Kingdom by the trade name Pi, and they used to run off batteries, big batteries which were imported and would last a while. Many people still by that time used bonfires for lighting, and as such they were not exposed to other sources of lighting. For instance, the wick light was introduced in the 50s, I believe, along with the lantern with a glass cover and a wick lighting in the center, which would keep winds blowing from blowing out the light, unlike the wick light, which would be blown away if you did not shield away from the wind. We will start with those humble beginnings and look at the context of being in a country like Uganda. I will examine the excitement of childhood, the expectations of a child, the great hopes of a child in its parents, the curiosity we had at the time for the white population, because save for the colonialists and a few numbers of Indians that trailed into the country for the construction of the railway, we predominantly remained a black race in much of Uganda. But for a child, life is exciting, life is worth looking at, and we will take that journey and move on bit by bit. So join me in the Empower Network, our great friend bringing us liberty, and do not fail to keep along. It may be exciting, a variation of what perhaps you may have in your own country, but at the same time a very interesting and good journey, I believe, which we shall be able to share. Bye for now. Cheers.